Oh, man. That was maybe the grandest opening I've ever done.
Your countdowns are getting more precise every single time we do this.
Yeah, and they can't even hear it. They're missing out.
They can't. You don't know the magic. You don't know the magic that goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, they're so missing out. Huh.
I know. It always reminds me of that scene in Wayne's World where they're no longer at public access and they've got a little bit of money and the guy is doing the countdown, but he doesn't do the 2 and the 1. I think for some reason sometimes I think you're just not going to say the numbers, and I'm like, oh, I hope he says the numbers, or else I'm not going to know what's going on.
Yeah, I say them just for your sake. But if I was being more professional, I would not say them. But
no, we also don't have a clapper. Or anything like that.
But this is the Cinema Discovery Project, and
it is.
We can do what the hell we want because it's ours. And we are back again this week, and we are now back around to our next spotlight, where we talk about a classic film. Sometime, maybe we should do a shitty film one day. I don't know. We should.
Or perhaps a guilty pleasure or something like that.
We need to. I think for the most part we've been doing, great films, what we consider to be great films, and of course this one I think might be one of our greatest.
I would say so. It's definitely, I would say one of the best films we're going to be covering so far, because it's also done by one of the greatest filmmakers I think we've going to be covering so far. At least in my opinion. I would say so. Yeah. But in this episode, we're going to be going over Akira Kurosawa's 1963 film High and Low, starring, of course, Toshiro Mifune, as well as one of Steven's favorites.
Tetsu Nakade? Is that?
Yeah, Nakade? Yeah. Who many of you maybe don't know is in the film Harakiri, which is an amazing film that I think that's something we got to do a spotlight on eventually.
That movie.
Because that movie's amazing. And it was a movie that I had suggested to Steven way back when we first started talking about movies and stuff. And that film is directed by Masaki Kobayashi, who's done a few films as well. But I think Harakiri is probably his most well-known and best. Coincidentally, both of these films are in the Criterion Collection, as pretty much every Akira Kurosawa film is, I think.
A good amount of them.
By this point. I mean, I'd have to run the numbers on that.
He did 30. He did 30 films. I'd say between the Criterion editions and the Eclipse editions, probably a good 85% of his movies are in the.
Yeah, I don't want to get off on a huge tangent, but there are several of his films that haven't been put out yet by Criterion. I think they own the rights to. I think it's like Dersu Uzala and some other stuff from the 70s and whatnot. I don't think have been quite released yet, but a good chunk of his filmography has. And like we said, 30 films may sound a lot, but not really if you consider that he was doing films all the way from the 40s up until the 90s.
Yeah, 90s. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good chunk of time, and he only did 30 films, but I don't think we need to delve too much into Akira Kurosawa because we're probably going to talk about him a lot throughout the Cinema Discovery Project, but he's considered one of the greatest filmmakers of all time by many, many people and for many, many reasons. Yeah. Probably too many to go into now without taking up so much time. All you have to know is just look at his filmography and you'll see
countless great films after great films.
Countless great films. Seven Samurai, Rashomon, etc., etc. Sanjuro, Yojimbo.
I mean, tons of his work is what inspired some of pop culture, especially Star Wars.
Right. Yeah. Hidden Fortress is the basis for Star Wars. So that whole generation that we've talked about many, many times, the new Hollywood generation, which we did a whole episode on, so check that out if you haven't seen it yet or listened to it yet. Many of those people were inspired by Akira Kurosawa, and they rightfully say, yeah, we watched those films and we love those films. Those were our inspiration in making our own films. And you see that throughout the generations. And Akira Kurosawa is still an influence today. But High and Low is a bit of a departure from some of the films we mentioned. He, like you said, it's not a Seven Samurai. It's not a Rashomon.
It's more
Yojimbo Sanjuro. It's what I guess you could say a dramatic thriller or a suspense drama or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I mean, it's also, for the time when it came out, it was more modern, for its time, like it, he's known for doing a lot of period pieces,
feudal Japan, which is where a lot of his samurai films were set. And those films have a very Western feel to them. They could feel like Japanese Westerns.
Once again, a lot of his movies inspired Westerns, the Seven Samurais.
Yeah, or he was inspired by Westerns. So it's like they go hand in hand. But this is a bit of a different film. It's a crime procedural. It's a
crime thriller, also, a moral tale at its heart,
Yeah, there was a lot of political stuff in here that I wasn't aware of watching it when I watched it the first time. I've since seen it 3 times now, and the political themes in it were definitely more pronounced this time, and they feel very contemporary as well, which is kind of great to see, because these films never get dated if they feel contemporary. But this film was also based on a 1959 novel called King's Ransom by Ed McBain, so it's a loose adaptation. Sure. But of course, many of its aspects are changed, as most adaptations are. But without further ado, Stephen, do you want to just dive right into the plot?
Let's do it. And as usual, we will spoil this movie. So if you have not seen High and Low, I think if you don't own it, you can, hopefully maybe you have the Criterion channel, and it's probably on there to stream. But there's ways to get this movie. Definitely, you can rent it. You can but it's though it is a 2 hour and I think 23-minute movie. It actually moves pretty good.
It does. It moves surprisingly well for a movie of that length, and for a movie that really gets into it when it comes to police investigation and just going like beat by beat and stuff like that. But we'll get into that. But first, it starts off, the first, I would say 53 minutes to an hour of this film is all within like one location.
Yes.
And it's all set within the house of Toshiro Mifune's character and his family. His name is Kingo Gando. And it opens up with him talking with a bunch of men, like sitting on couches and stuff. And what we come to know is that they are all part of this national shoe company, this big-time shoe company. And what we learn is that they're all kind of relatively, corporate people within.
They're like the members of the board.
Members of
that own shares of the company.
They do. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to convince Toshiro Mifune's character, Gondo, I'll just call him Gondo,
sure,
that's how they refer to him, and of going in with them in terms of putting his percentage of shares in, so that they can then like overthrow the guy who runs the company, and then they will have control.
Yeah.
The thing is what they want to do in terms of changing the company is they want to make cheaper shoes.
They want to find a way to make more money by making a worse product. Is what they see as the future.
Yeah, basically they want to make products that aren't durable, won't last, so that people will buy more of them. Well, specifically women. They have this model shoe that they show Gondo, and he is not having it. He does not want any part of it, because he's kind of he's a man of principles that we'll see throughout the movie, but you see it right away that this guy is like a rock. You know what I mean? Like, he's very
this opening scene gives you an idea of the kind of guy he is, or at least gives you a kind of guy he would like to be, or he likes to say that he is a man of principles, that would stick to his guns, would do the right thing, because he thinks that the right thing is to make sure that the customers have a good product, and whether or not it makes them the most money, at least they have their reputation, and so but of course, so you don't know this yet, but he has ulterior motives too.
He does, but before that, he reams these executive guys rips up the shoe in front of them and says, like, this insole is like cardboard. This is awful. He just like tears it apart in his hands to show how flimsy this shoe is. And it just shows that, it's getting into this idea of corporate greed.
Yeah.
It's getting into this idea of like economic greed and just how these companies are just for profit. They don't care about making a quality product as long as it sells.
It kind of reminded me, that whole situation kind of reminds me of when it came out about Apple and how they were like letting they had like something set up to where their devices would eventually like fall apart.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they have like lifespans.
Yeah, basically, and then the battery wouldn't work anymore, and then it would make you have to buy new products. Yeah.
Yeah, yet again, something that makes this movie very contemporary.
I mean, it's something a lot of businesses, I'm sure, do.
Yeah, corporations are still trying to make money. No big shocker there. But so they storm out. They storm out in a huff.
He does have his right-hand man.
His right-hand man, he does, who's his like apprentice, who's in line for a promotion. And that's going to play in a little bit soon. But he's in line for a promotion as one of the directors. But he's escorting them out. And the wife comes down the stairs. She's like, oh, leaving already. And they're like, yeah, whatever. They just play it off and they just leave. But outside is they talk to his right-hand man. And they're like, what's it? They kind of like say...
Basically, they try to get him to help him.
They kind of bribe him. They try to bribe him, basically, into giving up information about what his boss is doing. Like, what's his plan, what's his deal, essentially. And before we get any type of reveal there, it cuts back to inside. And this is where believe this is where we first are introduced to the children. The children are playing like
playing cowboys and robbers.
Yeah, like cowboy, like sheriff.
Yeah,
robbers,
cop and robbers.
So they got they have like the hat on, the plastic toy guns. They're chasing each other. What we learn is that one of the children is June, who is the son of Toshiro Mifune's character and his wife, Gondo and his wife, and then the other one is we learn a little bit later on that it's the son of the chauffeur. I think his name is Shinichi. And so they're playing around and whatnot, but they decide that they're going to switch places. Yeah. And
I think that the son's playing the cop, and and then the other kid's playing, which, of course, with the themes of this movie, very much kind of play out as, because the name of this movie, High and Low, is very directly talking about the higher class and the lower class. People.
That's where it gets very political.
And also, of course, with the kid, the cops and the robbers, the cops are the higher class, so then they switch places, and the lower class kid gets to be the cop, and then, we go from there.
Right. But when they run off screen, because like I said, this whole opening hour or so takes place in this one-roomed area. What I learned while watching the movie, and then there's a great 37-minute making of documentary on the Criterion where all of the stuff you saw in the movie was all done on sets, and which is kind of mind-blowing to me just because it doesn't feel like a set, but I guess it really, really worked. Like they had 3 different sets for the house. They had the exterior shots of the house was a different set. Interior of the house was a different set, and then another room in the house was a different set in 3 different places. Very fascinating filmmaking. They get into all kind of like the angles and the way Kurosawa would set up the cameras and the lighting and all this kind of stuff. Amazing technical filmmaker of Kurosawa. This guy knew exactly how to put people in a frame, knew exactly mise-en-scène and stuff like that, and you see the way characters are framed within this first hour, because there's so many people that come and go within this one space in so much time.
He knows how to me, I think he's the best I've seen of somebody that can get the most out of one shot. Where if there's people talking, one guy could be in the foreground talking and listening, and then this guy's over here on the left side. He finds a way to get as much out of that one shot, and it won't be boring. And
it's usually all one shot. And it's
a lot of masterful shots like that in
done.
Seven Samurai. He just does it all the time. I'm just like, Jesus, like, how does he keep this interesting? And he doesn't even move the camera.
I know, it's kind of crazy. But what happens is, this is when Gondo like gives us the reveal of what his grand master plan is when it comes to the shoe company. He's telling his wife and his right-hand man that over the last couple of years, he's been buying up percentages of stock here and there. He's been like mortgaging, borrowing money, going into severe debt over just buying enough to basically own the company himself, or own 47%, which would be more than what those other guys had, plus the main boss up top. So he wants to own the company himself. And he wants, of course, to keep it. He wants to keep the quality up as well as adapting to new trends and stuff like that. But of course, that doesn't lead to as much money as those other guys' plans are. But that's his model. And that's what he wants to do. And he's closing like his last deal now. And he's kind of celebrating a little bit before the deal is officially closed. I think he starts like pouring out like champagne or something, and it's like you may want to hold back a little bit because shit's about to hit the fan.
Yeah, but it's one of them things. It's like has nothing to do with the business, has something completely nothing to do with it. Yeah.
No, no. What happens to him doesn't have like it's not like someone's wedging into the business deal. Sort of. We'll get to that in like literally now, but he has to pay like 50. I think it was like 50 million yen. To close this deal out, and he's going to send his assistant with a $50 million check to I think Osaka, and to just to hand it over, and then he'll be able to complete his master plan. But before that happens, he gets a phone call, and this phone call says, "Hey, I've got your son. If you want him back, you have to pay me 30 million yen." And the person over the phone breaks down like, I want, non-sequential serial numbers. I want a certain amount of money in this, a certain amount in this type of bills and that type of bills, all that kind of stuff. And of course, he's like freaking out. He's absolutely freaking out. Shiro Mifune is amazing in this movie when it comes to his reaction and acting in general, because he goes through so many different emotions. He goes like anger and frustration and all kind of stuff. But in this scene, just the way in which Kurosawa frames it, because he did like a close-up shot of like all three people in the frame. Like the wife is in the frame, and I think his assistant's in the frame, and he's got the phone up to his ear, and just all three of them in one shot, all of them trying to listen to what's on the phone. So he writes all the specifications down, and he puts the phone down, and of course the wife is freaking out, and he's like, of course I'm going to do anything to get my son back, and I'll pay it right away, and all this kind of stuff. And it's just, it's like, and then the assistant wants to call the cops, but the kidnapper said, don't call the cops. And and so what happens?
As this is happening, but they're about to.
As everybody's freaking out.
Suddenly, his son walks in the room.
Oh yeah, and they're all like, "Oh my goodness, must have been a joke," right? And then, but I think, but during that or right before
the
that
driver
phone call,
shows up.
The chauffeur walked in, and I think he had like a code or something for his son, and he's like, and she was like, and then and he's just standing there while this is all happening, kind of freaking out himself. But what happens is, of course, the son walks in, like Steven said, and then they're like, okay, where's the other one? And they go running to look, and they can't find him, of course. And lo and behold, what happened is the kidnapper kidnapped the wrong kid because they had switched costumes. Yeah. And now the film kind of kicks into a different mode.
So now the part of the kind of the central moral conundrum, at least for the first half of the movie, is like, now that it's not his son that's been taken, does he still feel he still feels, now everybody's pressuring him to still pay the money, though it's not his son now.
Right. And it's like, and that becomes, I think, the moral imperative right away. And whatever is that, initially he's very resistant. Um, and what happens is the kidnapper does figure out that he got the wrong kid, and he calls back and says, "I still want the ransom."
Well,
so now
didn't the cops show up before?
Yeah, the cops show up before then. They show up as like dressed in like delivery van uniforms, and that's how they sneak in. So because they think the house is being watched, which we know later on, which we know that it obviously is. So they show up, and that's when we get introduced to what's his name's character, Nakatai's character, Tatsuya Nakatai's Chief Detective Takara, and he's kind of like the main investigator behind this kidnapping. He and Sheriff Mifune kind of work closely together on this because he's the guy in charge of the investigation. So they come in, and that's when we get the second phone call. Like I just said,
they tap
still
the phone
wants it. And of course, they tap the phone and all that they close the blinds and all that kind of stuff. And in this scene, though, when I think this is the scene where Gondo just tells the kidnapper, "No, I'm not going to pay. I'm not going to pay. It's ridiculous." All this kind of stuff. And in the background, the chauffeur is, you can see it. It's some of the best background physical acting I think I've ever seen. Because there's no, he's not crying or wailing out loud, but his body language is just destroyed.
He's defeated yet, and he can't. It's like it's one of the things where it's like he knows he can't be angry. He doesn't know how to feel. He just is helpless, completely helpless to the situation, because he has enormous respect for him, but yet he needs his help, and he's not willing to help him.
Yeah, and just he's slumped and just like crumpled over and just defeated is a good word. But what's crazy is he's not even defeated. He doesn't even like try initially to do anything.
Inconsolable.
Yeah, and what is fascinating to me is that throughout the whole endeavor of trying to get this child back, the father is almost not involved at all. And it must be extremely frustrating from just that thematic familial standpoint of not being able to, rescue your own child and having others basically do it for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, the person that takes his son they don't care anything about. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have money.
They don't even. He doesn't even talk to the kidnapper on the phone. Yeah, the only time he really even gets any involvement in that is when Gondo wants to hear that the kid is okay, that the kid is alive. And he hears him over the phone, and, he says his name and stuff like that, and that's about it. And it's frustrating, and just like you see how that's killing him literally, like physically and probably emotionally. So Gondo says he's not going to pay. And basically, I think a whole night elapses, and the next morning, he still says he's not going to pay, because if he pays, it's basically going to ruin him financially and job wise and career wise and everything, because he's put so much stock into into his plan that if he doesn't go through with this plan, he's going to be financially ruined. And that's it. And it's again we're tap dancing around like what is morally right versus what is personally right. And then and as you're watching the film as a viewer, you're probably trying to make that decision yourself. Like, what would you do in his situation? Would you rescue this child who doesn't have any real ties to you whatsoever, other than you could
say to an extent that the fact that the kid was with him at the moment of him being taken, he was partially responsible for him being taken.
Right. He was in his home and all that kind of stuff. And that's what I'm trying to get at, is that, a morally upright person would, of course, do it without hesitation. But this person, from what we know from Gondo, is he's very strong-willed. and stuff
yeah,
like
though
that.
he has certain principles about his business, it doesn't necessarily make him morally, because though he tries to be a good person in that certain aspect, it takes a certain type of person to get where he is, which is that he's very self-involved.
But what we also learned in the movie is that he is someone who started off at the very bottom and worked his way up to the top. So it's not like he was born into money or inherited his position at this company or anything like that. He started like on the factory floor and worked his way up to the executive level. So we learned that about him, and apparently he's been in the business for like 30 years. And so that's a very interesting aspect as well, because he's not necessarily, he's perceived as being someone who is on the high. Like literally his house is on top of a hill overlooking like some poor neighborhoods. So he's literally on top of the world, if you will. But he didn't start there. He worked his way up to there. So maybe it ingratiates you more towards his character by knowing that, other than him just being, another rich person doesn't want to give up his money to save someone.
There's a scene also that kind of gets into that a little bit, where his wife's trying to convince him to pay, and he tells her, you've never lived without money. You don't know how it is. You're telling me to give away all of our money, and I know how it is to be poor. You don't, so don't tell me you'll be okay,
Right. I mean, she's trying to convince him to do it. The chauffeur's trying to convince him to do it. And the police are
they're kind of staying out of it. They're saying that it would be beneficial for you to do it, but they're not saying do it,
There are often scenes, like there's a scene where I think one of the very next scenes is when his right-hand man comes in, and we get the revelation that his right-hand man basically sold him out to those executive dudes from the day before for a promotion, because he no longer has confidence in Gondo as a person, as a businessman, because he hesitated in this moment. And it's very, very interesting how you would backstab somebody like that who's, taking you under his wing as an apprentice and all that kind of stuff. And it just goes to show you that money is a great motivator.
Well, just as quickly as he decided to not help this, get this kid back, that guy decided to turn his back on him when he needed help. There's a parallel there.
What is interesting though is initially he says, like I said, he's not going to help. But he's not. He's still like, there are times where he says, okay, here's the check. Go get on that plane, go to Osaka. And he's like, other times, okay, give me that check back. I'm not going to do it. So he's tap dancing back and forth between fully like letting the kid go and whatever happens, and paying the rent.
Yeah, because he's on a time crunch. It has to get done soon,
Right.
Both do. They're coming to a collision point.
I mean, there's a moment where the chauffeur pleads with him to
it was after a phone call, another phone call that they get.
Yeah, it was after another phone call where, of course, he I think he bought them some time or something like that, and he wanted so the chauffeur kind of just begs him, just says, I'll be your slave for life.
You won't have to pay me.
I'll make my son work for you too. I mean, I'll do anything. And this is when, and then of course, what's interesting is that the way that whole scene is framed is he's badgering him, and Gondo is up against the curtains, and he's like, there's no place for him to go, so he keeps turning his head and his body towards the curtains, and he just can't go anywhere. He's like trapped, and it's kind of a physical metaphor for the trap that he's in right now. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place. And of course, as I was saying, but what really forces his hand, I think, is when his betrayal from his right-hand man comes into play. And he tells, he tells him about it, and of course Gondo is pissed and basically kicks him out of his house. But during that, But during that, his right hand man just spills the beans to everybody. Like, this will lead to your financial ruin. You're gonna take me down with you, and you owe money here, there, and everywhere, and all this kind of stuff. And the cops are like, they just kind of turn and walk away a little bit, as in like, this is an awkward conversation. We gotta get out of here. and it's like, it's kind of when like two people are arguing and you're just standing there and you don't know what to do, so you kind of just like look away or lean away someplace else. But this is kind of what really forces his hand to pay the ransom. And once he decides to pay the ransom, what we don't see is that the kidnapper gives them instructions on how to place the money, and they're going to place this money in these briefcases that are a certain size. And each briefcase holds 15 million yen. But what the cops want to do is they want to put like these little like capsules in them. And what happens is if the briefcases are disposed of in any way, if they're drowned, one of the capsules will release a strong smell that's going to alert someone. If they're burned, they're going to release a pink smoke so that it'll alert them. And what happens is they can't really quite figure out how to get the capsules in the briefcase. Yeah. So Gando's like, he does it himself. He brings out his old tools and stuff, and he's like, this reminds me of when I was like, making shoes back when I was working in the factory and whatnot. So he does that. He does that for them, and
he's having to get back down into the low levels to get this done.
Really, yeah. It's kind of like regressing himself back in order to get it done. And what we learn is that, but what is interesting is sometimes during the film, there are things that happen that we don't see. Like I said, that whole like instruction thing when it comes to the briefcases, we don't see it. It's kind of off screen. But
it really doesn't. We don't really get into that stuff until the second half of the movie.
But what Kurosawa does is he reveals it to us by the actions of the people. Like, we see that they're putting money in these briefcases, so us as viewers must recognize, hey, this kidnapper wants things done a certain way, and that makes sense. You know what I mean? He's not spoon feeding every single piece to us. He's kind of letting us, put some pieces together our own. And what also the kidnapper wants that we also don't see on screen is he wants it delivered like via train.
Yeah.
And we get this whole train sequence where there's, of course, Gondo and, of course, a bunch of the cops are on this train. And the cops are, they're in plain clothes, non-conspicuous, and they're kind of seeing if they can catch the person on the train during the transaction.
Thing is that all the instructions are not over. When he gets on there, he gets a phone call. And there's further instructions. The train is only a transport. He has to dump the money outside of the train, so there's no way to, get to him.
No, what the instruction does, he's got to dump the trains out of a window, and the only window that opens is like one in a washroom or something. And what I learned though is that the way in which Kurosawa shot this whole train sequence is he shot it all like sequentially. Like he had like a bunch of different cameras set up along this train, and he shot everything in like at the same time. It was very fascinating to read, to hear about. And so they had to do all kind of like manipulation when it came to the train and all kind of stuff. Just fascinating stuff. But what happens is Gondo wants to see the kid before he makes the dump off. So they have somebody standing outside right before a bridge, it's either right before a bridge or right after a bridge, and he's gonna dump the money out, and then they're gonna release the kid. So he sees the kid, dumps the money out, but what happens is the cops set up cameras all across the train in order to catch the person from every different angle possible and to see if there's anyone else around who looks suspicious. So they have like 8mm cameras set up, 16mm cameras set up, and then we see all these things happen like boom, boom, boom. It's a really like intense sequence, and like I've said, this movie moves just like there's a lot of dialogue, but it moves, and there's no like real fat in this movie. Everything pushes the movie forward. Every scene like matters up until this point, of course. So that happens, and they then go out and they get the kid. And this scene always fascinates me. The father isn't there to retrieve his child. It's Gondo who's there. And I'm like, okay. And I found that it just further proves the point we were talking about earlier, that the father is not involved at all in this recovery investigation or anything. He's not even there to pick up his own son. And I don't know why that decision was made. We never see it. I think it's more just playing into that theme we were just talking about.
Yeah, him bringing himself back down to the lower, Yeah, it's that, and I just think that, maybe logistically, if you want to, be realistic about it, you wouldn't want to bring the father of the kid along with on the on this mission.
Oh, yeah, not on the train.
On the.
But I mean to pick him up afterwards.
Sure, maybe, but they didn't know where the pickup point was going to be.
I guess that's true too. But I just find that to be interesting, fascinating. So they recovered the kid, but they don't have the kidnapper or anything like that. And this is when the movie shifts.
Yeah.
Shifts focus and shifts everything into a crime like manhunt procedural film as opposed to like a ransom movie. Yeah. And this is where we got a lot of police procedural stuff.
Them doing stakeouts and as you said before, they're still on the lookout for any signs of the pink smoke or the whatever that could give them links to where the money is, because that's really their key is to try to track the money,
And what is also interesting is in like for the next hour and 20 minutes or so of the movie, Gondo's character kind of falls into the background significantly. We don't see much about him, but we hear a lot about him. What we hear is that he's considered a massive hero by the public. He's getting all kind of public backing and all kind of that heroic swell and good and positive feelings and whatnot. But that doesn't mean diddly squat when it comes to his company.
Yeah, they don't care. They're still going to force him out.
Yeah, they still want to force him out, and regardless of all the goodwill that he has with the public, and what is interesting is that after that shift, and we get to the more police stuff, the main there's really no main character anymore because we've been following Gondo this whole time, and the film kind of shifts to, I guess, the Tokura character, I would say. Yeah, I would say that Tatsuya Nakata kind of becomes the main character because he's the chief detective and investigator. So we're now following him and his team's investigation of what's going on. Yeah.
And kind of one of the first things that happens is they find these two bodies that were overdosed on heroin, and they end up being accomplices to the kidnappings.
Yeah, what they find is they from the video, we get like this whole big like press conference thing. We get this whole big police like I said procedural thing, and they basically lay out all the facts to us as if this is like an episode of CSI, and they say like, okay, we've been able to get the video of this person who dropped the kid off, and we got some eyewitnesses that saw them drive over in a certain area, and we got to see, they get all this kind of eyewitness stuff and investigative stuff, and we've learned, and they actually recovered the car that the kid was in that they was used to drive him to the handoff, and they find that it's covered in like dust, but also like pieces, like it smells like a fish market. So they go to a fish market and they discover that that okay, the car definitely drove through here, but what we also see is that there's a scene where people are listening to the recordings back and they're just analyzing them like beat for beat, beat for beat, and they hear like a trolley noise in the background. So they're like, hey, that sounds like a trolley, but the only trolleys in that area are like this one, and this one. Let's see, and then they go to find a like a specialist who knows the different sounds of trolleys.
Sure.
and they're like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing, but yeah. And the guy's like, yep, that's this one. It goes, it makes a certain sound. So when they're at the fish market, they're like, hey, where's the trolley? Where's the trolley around here? And the guy goes, oh yeah, it's over there. And then he's like, and then of course the capture, now if they have the boy back, they can get information from him, and he paints a picture of what he saw while he was kidnapped and all that kind of stuff. And now we get to also a point where the father wants to do something. He wants to feel as if he contributed in some kind of way. So he takes the boy.
First of all, he gets mad at him because he doesn't know anything.
Yes, he does. He does get mad at him. He's like overly aggressive towards the boy because the boy like can't really like he does. It's a traumatic experience.
Gondo's paid $30 million for you to get free. You better have something.
Yeah, you better have some information. That's not the best thing to do, because for a child like that, if you scare them enough, they're just going to give you false information just because they're scared.
And to be honest, if there was one flaw in this whole thing, is that the kid's not traumatized at all.
No, he's back playing with June, and they're gonna run off and play together. And I'm like, remember the last time you guys ran off and played together? You got kind of kidnapped.
Are you not scarred at all by your experience?
Yeah, maybe you should like stay a little close. You know what I mean? Like, don't leave this room. Really. So they decide. Where was I? Oh yeah, they find the car, and they basically find the hideout of where the kid was, and also the two people who were hired. I say hired in quotes by the main kidnapper to I guess keep the kid, or probably kidnap the kid for all we know. And what we learn is that they overdosed from heroin. They're heroin addicts. But they were given like 90% pure heroin, which caused them to die.
Yeah. This was the main guy trying to close the loops.
Oh yeah, he's trying to no witnesses, no loose ends, as they say, and he did that on purpose. And we also learned that, like, I think that they use like industrial grade ether to, like, I guess douse the kid or whatnot. And so like they're trying to put all these pieces together. So the bodies are found. The cops assume that it was, somebody else. They have a letter that was written by the kidnappers to the main kidnapper, basically saying, we want more heroin or else we're going to use this money. Because I guess they're the ones who did the pickup of the money. But the cops tell the press, we're telling you this, but don't print it. Don't say this out into the news or anything like that, because from what we know right now, the main kidnapper does not know that these people are dead. So we can then use this to lure him out. And by doing so, we can catch him. And this is when we get to like a scene where you see the pink smoke, like you mentioned. They're at Gondo's place, and the kids are like, hey, come look at this beautiful pink smoke. Because there's another scene in there where it was actually after that where they print like, they allegedly print wrong information just to kind of spook them. They're like that they found one of the bills that was used. Yeah. And like they believe that it's this, and Gondo's getting all this praise. We actually see the killer. I keep calling him a killer. He's not. Although he is a killer.
He is, but
he is a killer. He is a killer, but he's the main kidnapper. We see how he lives like right in that slum type neighborhood, that poor neighborhood that sees directly at Gondo's house. And there's a great review where like these cops are walking by and they're just commenting about the area, and then the camera moves towards this one person, and of course, if you have a keen eye or anything like that, you know that this guy is probably the kidnapper, and of course he is. But he kind of gets a little spooked, so he dumps all the money into like this hiding place in his house, and he's gonna get rid of the bags because they made the bags purposely stick out. So he sends them to an incinerator, and of course you burn them, pink smoke comes up.
And interesting enough, they actually make in the movie, though the movie's black and white, they made the smoke pink in the movie.
Which is kind of cool. Kind of cool. So then one of the cops goes over to the incinerator, and this is kind of a funny scene because the guy who runs the incinerator is pretty hilarious.
Yeah. A little comic relief.
A little bit of comic relief. Like, he's like, yeah, people just dump their garbage over here, whatever. There's one scene where he's just picking up a bunch of tin, and he just yells, "Tin doesn't burn!" He just throws it. It's hilarious. He's like, yeah, everybody comes here. I don't remember anybody, but he's like, yeah, it was probably a young person, probably an intern at the hospital, because it was a young person, not old enough to be a doctor. And he said, hey, burn this, Pops, and doctors wouldn't call me Pops and stuff like that. So that kind of leads them towards the hospital. And what we do end up finding out is that this person is someone from the hospital. And we also know that because Shinichi does draw a picture of the person, and he's
wearing like a surgical mask.
He's wearing that, and he also has like a bandage on his hand covering up something, right? Yeah. So they basically stake out the hospital, and that's when they discover who this person is. And this is when they kick into another scheme, like we were just talking about, of having to lure him out to commit the same crime again in order to catch him in the act. So they make another false note, they deliver it to him, and then they basically track him. They track him to where he's going to buy more heroin, where he's going to deliver it to that hideout, and then they can catch him. But along the way, a sequence of odd things happen, I think. And just the way in which we see him go about buying the heroin, I found to be interesting and fascinating. First he goes to like this, what would you call it, Steve? A dance hall?
It's like a club. Like he goes to
a club, and he goes to a florist and buys a red carnation. I guess that's a signal to heroin or drug dealers that, hey, I'm trying to buy something. And then he goes to that club, and he dances with this woman, and I just don't know if doing a drug deal in a packed dance hall / club, handing over heroin, is the smoothest way to do it.
I
just found that odd.
Who knows, man?
I've never bought illegal drugs in my life, but I just feel like you want it to be a little more secluded than that.
Maybe, yeah, or maybe you want it to be super crowded. Who knows?
Yeah, and the way they're doing it, though, is they're dancing, and then they'll clasp hands, like, I guess, like, he'll hand over the money, she'll give him the heroin, or whatever it is, but they're tracking him the whole time, so they've got guys in there, like, trying to keep up with him, but they end up kind of losing him a little bit, and he doesn't end up going straight to the kidnapper's hideout. He ends up going to, what did they call it? It was, like, didn't they call it Dope Alley? I think they called it Dope Alley or something like that. Basically, it's a slum.
It's the really... Nocturne Alley of Harry Potter. It's the Nocturne Alley of.
It's a little worse than that. It's a little worse than that. Basically, it's a place where all of the drug addicts.
It's a crack house.
Hang out. It's basically they're homeless drug addicts and just hanging out in this alleyway or these streets and whatnot. Apparently, I was when I was doing research and watching that making of documentary, they sent a bunch of the people from the crew or who were working on the film to a real place like that to see how it looked. And because I think they were initially trying to actually film there, and they didn't end up doing it. They ended up making
not
it
safe.
on set. And they talked about how like they had to have like a cop take them through it and how traumatized they were by it, like how scared they were, because what happened is when We saw it in the movie when someone walked in there, the people just clamored towards them. These desperate, broken, shattered people who have absolutely nothing other than their drug addiction, and it's another, I guess, strong thematic element where you see literally people at the bottom rung of society, homeless, drug addicted, and you also see that there's no safety net for them. There's no one here helping them. They are literally at the bottom. And I just thought that was very interesting. And it's a really depressing scene. And so he rolls up in there, and it looks like he's purposely looking for a specific person or a specific type of person. And he finds one, and he ends up, I guess, testing out the heroin on this woman, and she overdoses and dies. I don't know whether he was doing that to make sure it would work, or whether he was doing it because he's just, a garbage, terrible human being. Either way, both. Kind of the same thing. It's kind of the same thing. So now he's got to head to the hideout. And of course he gets there and he's like, "Hey, open up, it's me." And the cops are there and they bust him.
And he almost tries to kill himself.
He does. He tries to take the heroin, and they wrestle it. They wrestle his hand away from his face, and they get him. And
well, I mean, they recover most of the money.
Yeah, because he spent some of it, and they bring it, and then I think this is the next scene where the cops go back to Gondo's place, and we see that, he's lost his house.
Well, he's having to auction off a bunch of his stuff, and
yeah, all of his stuff is getting priced up for auction. So they're sitting on like a couch or something, and the auctioneer comes over and is like puts like the price tag on it and whatnot, and he's like, "Oh no, you can still use it until the auction." It's like, "Oh, okay," and even the cop. Detective says, "Oh, we too late," and it's like, yeah, obviously too late. But what is interesting though is we know none of the circumstances around Gondo's financial peril, other than the fact that he owes money. Like, we didn't know if there was a deadline that he had to like get this money back. We didn't know how much money he owed specifically, where, and all that kind of stuff. But it's all kind of immaterial, because all you need to know is that he is that this, bad stuff was going to happen to him if he paid this ransom, and bad things did happen to him. But he doesn't seem destroyed by it.
I think his at least his soul is intact. He can at least feel like he has his integrity still.
Right. Yeah, because there is a scene earlier on. I think it's the pink smoke scene where the cops are meeting with him. And then his right-hand man does come back in and says, it's he kind of an ass move. He comes in, he's like, the executives, they're gonna let you keep your position. I fought for you, so basically kiss my ass because I fought for you. I put my career on the line to save you. Be thankful. And Gondo's like, just get out of here, get out of here, you piece of trash. Go away. I'm not gonna be a puppet for you or for any of them. I would rather forfeit my position than do that. And he's of course eventually kicked out, and then now we see him what's happening to him. And the final scene of the movie is interesting to me as well, because the kidnapper decides that he wants to see Gondo before he's executed, or he won't see anybody else but him, or something like that. And he decides that he wants to see him. So we get this scene of also the main kidnapper ends up being Genjiro Takuchi.
That's a nice name.
Yeah, Takuchi.
Yes.
And so he sees him, and then they have this interesting back and forth behind like this, the fenced off thing like you see in most.
Yeah, behind the glass.
Prison visitations. Yeah, behind, but there's not glass. But he sits there, and he basically, you don't really get his motivations, but you don't really get his motivations. Like, this is gonna sound interesting. He reminds me a lot of how Michael Caine's Alfred described the Joker in Dark Knight. Some people just want to watch the world burn for no reason other than just to make it happen. And it seemed like to me, this is what this guy wanted to do. He wanted to ruin this guy's life just because. Yeah. He didn't have any personal ties to him. He didn't have any personal vendetta against him, other than the fact that this guy lived at that house on top of that hill, and that he was looking into him that. That was
he's somebody that's trying to even the playing field between the high and low.
Right.
He's just the status quo. Somebody that's trying to, equal the level the playing field, and he's just this kind of not an unstoppable force, obviously, but he's just a force of evil. He just wanted to do bad things to make people have pain, and that's, fortunately for the characters, he wasn't that good at it, apparently. So,
yeah, he's very confident, kind of in a sociopathic way. He says he doesn't regret anything. He just kind of envies. He just kind of, if anything, he's envious of Gondo in a way, and it just kind of destroyed him. It's interesting how envy kind of is also a self-destructive thing as well. And what happens is he kind of freaks out. He kind of freaks out a little bit after a little while. And I'll say this, Gondo is stone cold stern. He's not flinching. He's not getting emotional. He's not having an argumentative stance on anything. He's just there. And even when the kidnapper freaks out on him, he doesn't flinch. Just stands there. And then the guards pull him away. This metal gate comes down in front of him. This metal shield comes down in front of him, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, cheerful.
Yeah, it's very, very. Yeah, I guess so. Not really. I mean, there's some cheerful things. I mean, no children died in the movie.
Yeah,
that's kind of a plus.
That's a plus.
I mean, lives were ruined.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe not ruined, but we're definitely we're disrupted. I don't know if Gonzo's life is necessarily over. He's gonna be.
No. We did learn that he works at a new company now, and he makes less money, but he's happier, I guess. And he wants to now build that company up to be a rival to the other company that he used to work for. So if anything, he's finding perhaps a
second wind,
passion in life.
But yeah, I mean, it's as I talking about it and rewatching this movie, it feels like and there's a lot of movies about class disparage and but more recent film Parasite would be a great double feature with this.
Oh yeah,
a Korean film, so it's got some same vibes, but it's got that class structure, and it's got some edge to it, and I think watch this with Parasite. I think you'll enjoy that.
Oh yeah, the same themes of classism and all that kind of stuff are in that as well as they are here. If anything, that film is more obviously modern. It came out last year, but they're still saying the same things.
Yeah, I mean it's still talking about, like you said, the classism, but it's I think in Parasite you're getting maybe a little bit more of a.
Obviously, I think it's more obvious.
It's a more direct comparison between the upper and lower class, but
yeah, that seems to be the driving force of the plot of that movie, versus I would say High and Low, where it just happens to be a consequence of the actions that are happening within the plot. You know what I mean? Because the plot of High and Low is, like we said, it's a ransom movie.
It's a little more story driven, and Parasite's a little bit more thematically driven. Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, they're pretty. They're they're a good little pair.
Pretty damn good movies.
And but yeah, I mean, guys, don't take our word for it. Just check it out yourselves. High and Low is, I would say, one of my favorite Kurosawa films.
Oh yeah, I think it's top 5.
It's definitely top 5.
I would say it's a top 5 Kurosawa.
Come on, man, you know it is. You have to look at it.
I gotta, because it's Well, you know what? Yeah, maybe if it's top 5, maybe it is number 5.
Because
I'm thinking like Seven Samurai. Man, I don't know if it's top 5. Seven Samurai. You know how much I love Akira.
I know you do.
Ran is really amazing. Rashomon is also really amazing. Yeah, so I guess you could say a top 5. That makes sense. I don't know. I'd have to go.
It's tough. He's got so many good movies.
He does.
It's tough, but I'm sure we'll get back around to Kurosawa again at some point on another spotlight, or maybe an episode dedicated to him. Maybe we can go over some of his lesser known films or something.
That'd be kind of cool.
But I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Cinema Discovery Project. Where can we find you, Andrew?
You can find me on Twitter at Capzilla06, as well as my YouTube channel, Capzilla Productions.
And you can find me on Facebook, Stephen Billings. You can find the audio for this podcast on Podbean and Apple Podcasts. Thank you for listening, and hey, keep on watching them movies.
I know I will.